Good evening and welcome to the McKnight Center. I'm Darren Williams and I'm the Director of Education and Community Engagement here. And I just want to thank you for joining us to our first session of Loyal and Truth, Breaking the Binary. So thank you and give yourself a round of applause for joining us. Thank you. The creation of this series took some extra thought and communication as I wanted to make sure as we were working to celebrate diversity through the scope of the performing arts that it included diversity in the planning committee. And I just want to take a moment and recognize those individuals who are campus-wide leaders and stakeholders that really have a heart for the performing arts as well as a heart for diversity and inclusion. So those individuals that assisted me in creating this series, I'd like to thank Arissa Baxter Bradley from the Office of Multicultural Affairs, Tricia Chaparala Ayonza from Human Resources, Joyce Crawford, also from Office of Multicultural Affairs, John Mark Day from Leadership and Campus Life, Nick Holmes from University College Advising, Kayla Loper, also from Leadership and Campus Life, Laura Talbot Clark from the Greenwood School of Music, and student volunteer Rishi Malhotra. Well, join me in thanking them with a round of applause. I'm really excited to see how this series pans out. Make sure you come and join us again in October. In fact, Saturday, October 23rd, we'll be having a Rainbow Review, a variety show of sorts that will be highlighting the talents of our LGBTQ plus community. So keep an eye out for more details to come and how to participate come October 23rd. Otherwise, one other announcement is this evening is about speaking your truth and vulnerability. So please keep that in mind as these individuals are brave enough to share their journey and share a little glimpse of their story. But more importantly, if you feel moved and inspired by what they're speaking and you'd like to share a little bit of your journey in gender diversity and gender identity, there is a sign-up sheet at the table where you collected your pronoun tag that we would love to hear, and we're going to have some time in the evening for an open mic session before we wrap up with a panel discussion to debrief the evening. But otherwise, thank you again for joining us here at Breaking the Binary, our first Loyal and Truth. I can't say that enough how excited I am, and I thank you for being here. But without further ado, help me in warmly welcoming Jason Stevenson, our MC for the evening.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Jason Stevenson. And I'm going to break the ice by telling a story of my own before we bring our storytellers up to the stage, followed by our poets. So that's kind of how our night is structured. I'm on the Oklahoma City Story Slam leadership team, and throughout the course of the pandemic this past year and a half, we've continued to have a storytelling showcase, but virtually. We partnered with the Metropolitan Library System in Oklahoma County, and we streamed our stories through Facebook Live, and we're able to curate a number of different topics. And some of those topics were maybe a little more difficult to share organically in the moment in person at a dive bar where we typically have our shows. Because sometimes those topics that are just spur of the moment show up that night and tell a story of a missed love connection or something like that. People could just jump at that. But one of the topics that we were able to curate was like new voices to America, immigrant stories. And we don't typically have a lot of those voices in person at our live shows, but we had a month to recruit, and that was one of our best shows of the entire pandemic. So I'm a storyteller. I got my start back in 2017 at the Pride themed storytelling slam, and then kept coming back, enjoying just listening to stories. I'm a former high school English teacher, grew up just loving books and reading, and this whole art form of storytelling is still a little bit new to me, but I hope you enjoy the story I have to share tonight. So I'll break the ice with this story related to tonight's theme of talking about breaking the binary and talking about gender. So as a high school English teacher, for the first 10 of my 11 years in the classroom, I was deeply closeted. And I grew up Southern Baptist. I also grew up knowing about in 7th or 8th grade that I was gay. But I kept that super repressed. And my father's also a preacher, if that adds any spice to that. And I still knew, though, in my heart of hearts, that I would come out one day. And I just kept putting it off. But I wanted to create in my classroom, my high school English classroom, a place where students could find stories in the books that I had in my classroom library, in the books that we studied, that reflected all different kinds of people. And I felt that would be important for them to get to see those truths lived out. And so in my final year that I was in the classroom, that happened to be the year that I had made the big leap, and I was out to friends and family and eventually students, and everyone knew. But that summer before, when I had started that process already, I was out to my friend Gina. And Gina was my work wife. We planned everything together. We were both sophomore English teachers, and we both were big fans of these English teachers who also write books for English teachers named Penny Kittle and Kelly Gallagher. And Penny and Kelly were going to be at a summer conference down in the Dallas area, and we decided we wanted to go. And it was June, and we took our little road trip. And a side story real quick, Gina's sister had already met me before a couple times, but she didn't know I was gay. And Gina was talking to her sister Roxanne about our trip, and Gina made some comment about a hotel room, and Roxanne was like, "We all have separate rooms, don't you?" And Gina said, "Well, no, we're sharing a room." And Roxanne was just like scandalized. And then Gina said, "You know he's gay, right?" And then Roxanne was like, "Oh, okay, all right." So anyhow, we get down there to Texas, and the conference is, I think, 2 days. Maybe it was just one night, but 2 days long. And by the end of that first night, I was just super emotional after a day of English teacher conferencing and a couple beverages at dinner. And I decided to come out to my grandma through email while I was feeling myself. And I told Gina that that's what I had done, and I waited the rest of the night and did not get a response then. But I did the next day, and my grandma was pretty cool for how she responded and the age that she is and the culture she's from. So anyway, that's the stage. I've said it. And then on day 2 of the conference, I'm in my Penny Kittle session. The whole reason I went to this conference, that I wanted to learn more about how to be the best English teacher I could be. And one of the things that Penny Kittle shared with us in the workshop, and I did get a selfie with her, was some spoken word poetry, some slam poetry. And one of the spoken word poems that she had us watch and discuss and analyze was a trans man performing this poem, but writing a letter to his former self. And it was so powerful and so moving to hear someone speaking their truth while I, as a 34-year-old man at the time, was finally doing the same thing. And I know that everyone has their own journey and their own timeline, but it just really did resonate with me, especially coming from a state where it sometimes feels extremely conservative to hear affirmation of someone from the LGBTQ family. And the workshop finished up pretty soon after that. I think that was kind of the emotional climax of that workshop. And I think Gina was in it too, but we both went our separate ways to take a quick break or something. I don't know. But I know I was alone. And I know that I checked my Twitter because I had been tweeting about the experience. And I see that I have a private message in my DMs, my direct messages. And it's one of my former students. And I think this student would be okay with my sharing his name, and so I'll just share it. So it was Charlie, and Charlie is trans, and in this message, Charlie is coming out to me and telling me that that culture, that climate I created in the classroom was one of the things that helped him feel more comfortable with himself. And now Charlie's in college, happened to be going to this college, OSU, and is coming into himself and wanted to just let me know that I was a teeny tiny part, but and still an important part of his journey along the way. And so to have just come from this workshop, hearing a spoken word poem by a very young trans man, and then have one of my students come out to me as a young trans man like less than 10 minutes later, it was like the stars had aligned. And Charlie shared with me that I had made an offhand comment in class one time that had just stuck with him, resonated with him, and I don't remember saying it, but he says I did, and I believe him. And so what I had said was something to the effect of, straight people already have those kinds of books, or they have all that already. And that kind of, I realized hearing it after the fact, that kind of I outed myself a little bit to Charlie in that offhand comment. But I was making fun of straights. Not that there's anything wrong with being straight, for those of you in the audience, but that had stuck with Charlie. And so, of course, I told Charlie how proud I was of him. And then also, I not to one up, but I just felt like sharing too. And I was like, hey, I'm gay, and I want you to know. And I'm just so excited for you. So Charlie and I have continued to stay in touch. We've met up for coffee multiple times, check in on each other, and that's one tiny story that I have of being an ally to people who are working through or have already worked through this whole gender identity thing. So thank you so much for being here tonight, and we're going to get started with our storytellers first. I want you to make them feel super welcome. During poetry, sometimes people snap, but during storytelling, there's not really a response people typically have other than just that total engagement that you all are having. But we'll give each person a round of applause when they come out here. And so with that being said, we'll bring out our first storyteller of the night. Please make AP feel very welcome.
Hello, my name is AP. I am non-binary, I am lesbian, and I am fat. I also can't see any of you, so now all of my stage fright is gone. It's like I'm only talking to Donnie right here in the front row because it's the only person I can see. Hell yeah. So, I wanted to tell a story about coming to being or knowing that I am non-binary. As a little girl, which is a misnomer because I was neither little nor a girl, I had one wish in my head. It was the Aladdin dream. I don't know if you've ever done that in your head where you're like, I'm going to find a lamp and I'm going to rub that sucker and a genie's going to come right out and that genie's going to say, 3 wishes, my guy. Can't wish for more wishes. Can't make somebody fall in love. That's the only 2 rules, I think. I don't remember really well. And my one wish was, make me a boy. I did have a caveat that said, make me the same person, just a boy. Because, I'd read that saying that says, be careful what you wish for. And I wanted to be me. I just didn't want to be all me. And so I had that wish. And I was like 4 or 5 years old. And I kept having that wish. That one day I would grow up and all of this would be a little different. I would have something poking out where it wouldn't poke out before. Some things that were growing might shrink down. It never happened. I was not blessed with that. Instead, I grew up and sort of didn't understand where I fit in. I wasn't a girly girl. I wasn't a tomboy because I didn't like boys. I need to heavily imply that lesbian thing all the way from day one, all the way. So I didn't like playing with boys, didn't like talking to them, didn't like doing anything with them. I just wanted to hang out with girls all the time, always. And I couldn't really recognize what I was because all these girls I hung out with, they all like talking about boys, they all like doing their hair and makeup, and I hated it. It drove me insane. Literally, I am a crazy person, so I can say that. And it hurt growing up, knowing that I wasn't right. I wasn't a girl who liked boys. I wasn't even really a girl. And I kept holding that with me. And then as I grew up, because I grew up in the late 90s, early 2000s, which was a time, we all know this, I realized that like androgynous fashion was coming in. It was really cool because like all these super hot models, you couldn't tell if they were a girl or a boy, and they all ran down the runway and they all looked so good and so cool, and I was like, oh yeah, that. And then I remembered I'm fat. And fat people don't get to be androgynous. They don't get to be anything other than what they really are in our society. So unfortunately, I had hips, and I had butt, and I had these boobs, and I didn't know what to do with them. I hated them, and I hated myself because I wasn't like those androgynous people. I wasn't like a girl. I wasn't correctly androgynous. I didn't know what I was. And so, thankfully, by the time I turned 25, I went to therapy. Everybody, therapy is so good. If you can get it, please go get therapy. It's the best, I promise. And after talking to my therapist about all my trauma growing up and all that other stuff, I finally one day was like, hey, I don't think I'm a girl. And she was like, oh, tell me about that more. Tell me more. Because that's what therapists do. And I realized that saying I'm not a girl was like opening the floodgates for me. It was something that I'd thought in the back of my head, but never said out loud because I was afraid of it. And saying I'm not a girl was one step away from saying I'm also not a boy. I didn't really want to be a boy when I was a kid. I didn't want to have that genie grant that wish to give me the boy's body that I asked for, because that's not what I wanted either. I wasn't a boy. I was something in between, but kind of not. So one of my friends has expressed themselves that they feel very gender full, and I feel like the opposite of that. I'm like gender null. I'm neither female nor male. I have this fat body. I don't really know what to do with it. But there's something so freeing in the term non-binary. And when I realized that I could claim pronouns like they and them instead of she and her, it felt like freedom to me because I was no longer a broken girl, and I was no longer someone who wanted to be a boy. I was just me in my own fat body, understanding that there is no one right way to be a gender, and you don't have to be a gender. You can be all genders. You can be no genders. You can be both. You can be anything you want to be, and I didn't realize that until I had the courage to actually say the words, I'm not a girl. And that was also the year I first started writing. So it was like admitting to myself out loud was the impetus to giving myself permission to exist, not just as a person in front of other people, but as a writer on the page. And I'm just so glad that I can stand here in front of, I don't know how many people, because again, I can only see Donnie, but to be able to say that I'm non-binary is an expression of freedom that I don't think I ever, as a little kid, thought I would be able to experience. And I'm just very thankful. So thank you all for coming tonight, and I hope you enjoy our other storytellers and our poets. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much, AP, for sharing your story. Our next storyteller, Kata, is going to be making their way to the stage. Making her way. See, I don't even know her pronouns, so I need to get that figured out, be a better MC. As an ally, I try to make sure that I include my pronouns on my social media. So I have he, him, his on my Twitter and my Instagram. That might be something you could do as an ally if you're thinking about, well, what steps could I take to be more supportive of this community? And so we'll hear Kata's story in just one moment. Let's make Kata feel welcome.
Hi, I'm Kata, and you're right, I cannot see anybody. And I have autism. And the room is dead silent whenever I say that. Thank you. No, but really, just a lot of times when I say that, people are very just kind of pulled back from it, even though I don't really think it's something you should be ashamed of. And another fun fact about me is that a lot of my life has been spent trying to find the answers to a lot of things. And some of the answers are like fun things like, what does this value equal, or how do particles work? And the other ones are like, why am I being bullied? Why do I have so few friends? And why do people think what I say is rude and unfeeling? And I didn't really see anyone else struggling with that. And so I felt like my struggles were just a moral failing on my part. And I wanted to change that. And I wanted to present myself to the world as a more neurotypical person. And I did that two ways. This first way, I did it by just people watching. And looking back on it, that was actually very creepy because I would just sit with my little journal and just stare at people in the mall and just write. And I was a weird kid. I'm so sorry. The second way might even be worse, was just straight up just Googling stuff. And I remember I used to Google like how to smile properly or how to look when you're feeling a certain emotion. And it did get better because I had basically created a DIY instruction manual for how to talk to humans. And that was kind of the problem, was that I basically boiled down human interaction to a formula. And I was never really myself because I was really scared that if I was, people think I would be absolutely insane. And that was kind of it, was just neutral and just kind of not really myself, but also I didn't want to be myself. So I was okay with that. But something that my research didn't really help me with was identifying emotions. And I could not identify them in others, and I could not identify it in myself whatsoever. And so I wasn't able to make any like emotional decisions. I didn't make decisions off of what I felt was right or what I felt like was correct in the situation. And I started making all my decisions based off of logic and research. And I started to approach life that way as just, a series of correct answers that I'd always have. Right? Wrong. So wrong. Oh my God. And, enter middle school and you're exposed to all these ideas of gender and sexuality. And I understood gender like on a theoretical level. I understood it was a spectrum and it wasn't always static and it was fluid and it wasn't what was in your pants. And I understood it and I respected it in others. Oh, by the way, I figured out like the best way of dealing with transphobes from being autistic, and it's just asking them to define what a pronoun is. And I can assure you 9 out of 10 times they cannot do it. I asked somebody to define a pronoun once, and they went, "It's a professional noun." This was at an academic team conference. These people were supposed to be smart. I still do that to this day. I will meet people and they're like, "My pronouns are attack helicopter." I'm like, "Can you use that in a sentence, man?" Just, okay. Back on track. But I didn't really understand gender when it came to me. And so I did what I did best. Research. So much research. So much so that I became a walking gender studies pamphlet. And this had absolutely no benefit for finding out what my gender identity was. And I really struggled with it because I wanted so badly for someone else to tell me what the answer was. Because gender identity is one of those things where it's what you feel is right. It's what makes you feel confident. It's what makes you feel like yourself. And I didn't know what that felt like. And so I scoured all my resources looking for like a novel or an article or a BuzzFeed quiz that would definitively tell me who I was. And I wanted so badly just like a yes or no, a check or an X, or like a 1 or a 2. And I was really just looking for a binary answer in the place where the binary wasn't a thing. So we've come to today. Hi, my name is Kata Lavery. I'm 17 years old. I have no idea who the hell I am. I go by any pronouns, and I have a slight crisis every time I have to put my gender on a form. And everything besides that last part, I've realized, like, that's okay. It's okay not to have the answers for everything in your life. It's okay to not know everything about yourself. And it's okay to not know everything about others, your partner, your best friend. And to those who have found their gender identity, that's amazing. And I'm so proud of them for being themselves and living their truth. But it's okay to find, comfort in the unknown and solace in what you don't understand. And it's okay to not know who you are. Because what matters is that you're still valid and you're still loved. Thank you so much for having me. We have wonderful speakers coming up. Thank you.
Kata is 17, like Kata said. So here in this room full of college students, that's so brave and so incredible. And I guess I was kind of prescient when I said I'm not quite sure which pronoun to use, because that's something Kata's still figuring out. Our next storyteller is going to wrap up the storytelling section of the pre-planned portion of the show. Brianna Michelle will be making her way up here to the stage momentarily. Remember, if you're inspired by these stories and you want to tell a story that fits with tonight's theme, or if you happen to be a poet and you've got some poetry you want to read in honor of tonight's theme, you can sign up at that table right outside those back doors, and you could go do that in between the different speakers we have tonight. So we have time for a few more tellers or speakers or poets, if you're so moved. So hopefully Brianna Michelle's ready to come up and tell us a story. Let's make Brianna Michelle feel welcome.
My name is Brianna Michelle. I identify as transgender female, and my pronouns are she, her. I started my transitioning back in July 10th of 2018. I decided to start my hormone therapy, of all days, February 14th, 2019, Valentine's Day. Now, that's a gift that keeps on giving, I tell you that. I hadn't come out to my family yet. I kept on trying to find the right time. Yeah, right. That didn't happen. I knew time was against me because, well, things was going to be busting out in all different directions. Finally, in June of 19, I finally told my mom, and a couple of weeks later, my brother. They were both accepting and very supportive. My father never knew. He passed away about a month after I started transitioning. So, with my biggest anxiety set aside, I had to focus on keeping my job. I had to come out to them. December 3rd of 19, I came out to them, my managers. Their only concern was, is this going to affect your job? I looked at them and I said, no. If anything, it's going to enhance it. And they said, all right, put your name as Brianna on the schedule. it slowly trickled throughout my coworkers, and one at a time, very discreetly, they would come up and ask me questions about the whys and the how comes. One individual got on my bus that runs back up to what's called the fuel station. He said, "So what's going on?" I said, "I'm transitioning." He says, "You mind if I ask questions?" I said, "Sure." About the next 10, 12 minutes, he's asking me all kinds of wonderful questions. And I even went in as far as saying about the surgeries. Fast forward the next morning, he gets back on. I looked at him, I said, "Well, do you happen to have any more questions?" He says, "Not really, but I looked up on YouTube about that bottom surgery you were talking about. That hurt me just watching it." We still joke about that today. It's been a year and a half since I came out to my department. And I ended up with 3 groups of individuals. Ones who will use my name and pronouns and have a nice conversation. The second group will sometimes use my name. Maybe in a tight pinch they might use my pronouns, but they still interact with me. And then there's a third group who, well, they don't talk to me at all. To be perfectly honest, they never talked to me before, so there's no big loss. 2 out of 3. I consider that a win, a plus. The one individual who I talked about, I forgot to tell you, he was extremely conservative and very religious. When I found out about that, I was floored. But then again, it made me feel good. He took a chance and asked. He didn't judge me. He didn't say, "You're a freak, I don't want to talk to you." He took a chance and asked questions. I wish more people would do that instead of judging us. It doesn't matter if you're transgender or how you identify in the LGBT plus spectrum. Instead of hating us, ask the questions. You might be surprised. You might learn. I like to end this with 14 very special, heartfelt words. And always remember, you are special, you are loved, and you are not alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Brianna Michelle, for your story. We're going to transition to our poetry section. Next up, we have 2 poets on deck. A quick side story before we bring out William. When I did come out to my parents, I did so in person, but I did it through a prop or a letter. And so I pulled my letter out and I read it to them. And my mom had a great response. She it's lost to time, but she either said that was really brave or that took a lot of courage. But that was her very first response. But a follow-up question she said later, which made me giggle a little bit, was, "It seems like there's a lot more gay people these days." And I said, "Mom, I don't think that's it. I think just people feel more and more comfortable living their truth. And there's more acceptance and people are able to put themselves out there." So I think that resonates with all of us. Tonight, hearing these stories and these poems we're about to listen to. With that being said, let's bring William out, make him feel welcome. He's going to read some poetry for y'all.
Hello. My wife sent me the sign up for this, and I was like, that's me. And I thought it sounded fun to write some poems. But then I realized that I was still kind of processing all this gender stuff, and I hadn't written poems in like a decade. So if you like these poems, let me know. If you don't like them, tell someone else. I'm fine with people criticizing me as long as they have the decency to do it behind my back. All right, so this first one is called My Ballad to Coming Out. Am I out? I've only told 6, but I'm on stage reading MB poems in a skirt. Some suspect, but I've not shared my identity with friends, co-workers, or family who live 1,000 miles away and aren't safe. But friends here may be. If I come out, what will it change? Dear friends, I am non-binary. I'm panicked, though I know you're safe, and you'll respond affirmingly, but those words are still so hard to say. That's the first one. All right, this next poem is a villanelle through which I was kind of exercising some of the negative self-talk that I've been having during this transition. And because it was kind of negative, I decided to give it a silly pun title. So this one is called The Villanelle in My Head. All right. This isn't you. You look silly. Reading poems so garishly dressed, pretending you're non-binary. Midi skirts and cardigans like some cartoon librarian. No fashion sense, you look silly. More scalp than hair atop your head, an epic beard covers your chest. How could you be non-binary? You're too fat to be a snack. Your clothes could be a circus tent. You don't look cute. You look silly. You're old, boring, desperate, this sad attempt to be on trend, pathetic, not non-binary. You're just a man whose youth is spent, hoping to cling to relevance. This isn't you, it's just silly to think you're non-binary. All right, and this is my last poem. It's a little bit longer. It's a free verse poem that I've titled On Lost Time. Sometimes I envy the young MBs with their whole life to be who they are. I grew up with Don't Ask, Don't Tell, reruns of Klinger and Women's Clothes, seeking a Section 8 and laughs. Friends #1 in prime time. Could they be any more homophobic? MBs existed, I existed, but the language, the concept hadn't reached me. So I repressed, chronically unhappy, hiding in sometimes toxic masculinity, never convincingly enough for my father. But I matured, embraced femininity gradually, and there are benefits to coming out at my age. I've come to know that I don't owe my family any part of me, and I need nothing from them in return. I've had decades to shed unsafe connections, cultivating friendships affirming and supportive. I see the ugliness directed at fellow MBs, but from a distance, in other stories, so far never my own. I wish I could have known myself better when I was young and avoided years of trying to fit where I didn't belong, but I'm so thankful for the love and kindness I've felt with my every coming out. That's it.
Thank you, William, for sharing those amazing poems with us. His comment about a cardigan in one of his poems made me think of a tweet I recently saw on Twitter, and it was a selfie of a librarian, seemed to probably be an elementary school librarian. She was wearing a green cardigan, but if you've ever read the book or seen the book about the hungry caterpillar, her sleeve was the hungry caterpillar. And the quote on Twitter was just like, "Do you like my cardigan?" And that got a lot of tweets and retweets. It looked super cute and super cool. But then one of the many gay men I follow on Twitter quote tweeted that picture and said, "I would come out to her," right? And so that just made me happy, and I thought I'd share that with you all while we prepare for our next poet to come to the stage. Remember, if you're wanting to share a story in tonight's theme, or if you've got some poetry, just happen to have written and saved it on your phone, and you want to come up here and drop some lines, we would welcome it. We have some time in the schedule for that, so just sign up on that sign-up sheet right outside those doors. In the meantime, though, we've got our final poet of the scheduled evening. Please make Danny welcome.
Hey y'all, kumusta kayo? I'm Danny, or Dani as some of my relatives and friends say. My name is pronounced multiple ways, very, very liminal, and I embrace all of that. But I'm a poet, as Jason has lovingly introduced me as. But I'm going to talk a little bit about my story that kind of informs these poems in my lovely book called Salamat sa Intersectionality. So look it up. You can buy it. It's a cool thing, I think. But for all intents and purposes, growing up, I had a boyhood, right? Loved video games, hung out with boys, really saw myself growing into a man. And especially when I came out as gay, as a high schooler, I kind of had this idea that like maybe I'd grow into this man, and then my bodily insecurities, my confidence level, that would all change, right? But then when I got into college and I started to see visibly non-binary people, when I started to see more people like me and I started to interrogate myself, I was like, oh shit, something just like clicked in my head, right? That this could be a possibility for me, and that I didn't have to cling to some idea of manhood that never fit me, because just to give you kind of a little bit of background there, I never fit in with like the gaggle of white gay men who are often very body negative and can be very misogynistic and not really intersectional, and then just never really saw myself represented in gay porn either. And of course, as a young gay person, you often turn to stuff like porn to try to find yourself. But of course, all of the Asians, all of the Pinoys, as you might call them, were always subordinated. They were submissive. And I was just like, there's no agency there. But then I started to come into my non-binary identity, started to write about it more. And it's funny too, because I remember in 2017 telling a friend that, I could be non-binary, but like I can, it's fine. I don't have to come out or use they, them, but like I feel that, but it's fine. And that was 2017, but now I'm just like, fuck yeah, I'm non-binary, I'm here, I'm queer, gonna kill you all. I'm totally like militant about it now. But it's funny that I had this kind of like self-defeating prophecy there. But yeah, as part of that journey and me embracing my androgynous self and me being like, I'm queer and I like my body, but like I don't feel like those gay guys, but I also don't feel like the women either. I'm kind of in between. I feel genderful, as AP had alluded to earlier. I am the friend. But that kind of made me think about playing with gender some more. So I'm going to read some playful gender poems of you about me kind of deconstructing the idea of gender and how sometimes for me, gender is all about play. But I'm going to read a poem that's actually inspired by a video game. I don't know if there are any Borderlands fans in the audience or people who play those types of games anyway, but this is actually inspired by Borderlands 3, which has a non-binary playable character called Flack, and of course I had to play that character. There was no other option, and just so happens that Flack is the best character objectively. They just allow you to get through the game in the best of ways, but this is me kind of ruminating on that representation. It's called Repping in the Borderlands. Character selection: magical slum woman, ex-assassin a la Irish grandpa, mech-loving soldier lady, or robot beastmaster. It's obvious, no better way to blaze across moon rocks and galaxy's edge conflict zones than as a gentlemanly AI built to slay. In a universe where mayhem equals fun, the he-she of humans matters even less than good versus evil. Too many interstellar bounties to pick anything besides self. I loot space as a they-them non-human. A choice to other players is a flare signaling my return home. Even with video game classics like Androgynous Link and Baby Pink Kirby, I've never felt as close to an assemblage of pixels, or I've never known joy like ignoring a white man and two women to select the me I didn't know existed yet. And boy, doesn't it feel right to pistol whip alien desperados, my pronouns on their bleeding tongues, my metal vibrating with the hunt. Thank you, thank you. Now, this next poem in the spirit of play is ruminating on the apocalypse, because I have this whole sequence of poems, one of which is in my book, that kind of queers T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland and reimagines the wasteland as this place of radical possibility for genderqueer people. And so this is one of the poems, the last poem that exists in that series, and it's kind of just about people like me, my androgynous genderqueer friends, being ourselves, kicking ass in the apocalypse. It's called Post-Apocalyptic. 1. I wake among eviscerated liver, kidney, rectum, wipe eyes with bloody knuckles, smile for the bile of yesterday's survival. Another romp through our queer hellscape. 2. My body thrives in our world's transition from falling apart to long gone. I'm the interstice, the guy or gal in Prada combat boots and one-piece Steph dress. 3. The infected come as I chop through neckline, splatter Z-positive gunk on limb-ridden beds. My comrades, partners in flux, laugh at our slaughterhouse. 4. Agender Ray and androgynous J don't know the power of our wasteland. I want to twist and shout every time we kill among ruins of before, a corporate reproduction. 5. Comrades become frozen fingertips and unshaven faces. Oh, barely anything lives. We own ourselves. Okay, so I'm going to read one more poem for y'all, and just to explain this one a little bit more, this is actually the eponymous poem to my collection, Salamat sa Intersectionality, and if you do decide to pick up my book, it's a coming-of-age narrative, me coming into this intersectional weirdness of being queer, non-binary, mixed-race Filipinx, and neurodivergent, and then kind of unraveling the different experiences that have enabled me to claim myself, and in many ways reclaim myself. So this is kind of me in this poem reclaiming the monster within me, or at least the perceived monster, and being like, yeah, bitch, I am monstrous as fuck. I am very violent. I mean, not in a really violent way. Like, I'm abstractly violent, and I'm a threat. You should think of me as your non-binary threat. So this is kind of me incorporating all of that, like really coming into all of that through poetry. But without further ado, it's called Salamat sa Intersectionality. I'm not growing into a man under indigo sky on saffron fields. My swamp hemolymph perspires through Cebuano's skin, thick and brown, pliable and brown. Manure-rich air depresses my joints, supple as the wrist flicks of white man signatures of 1776, of ice black, not green tea, of Ben Franklin orgies. I'm not patriotically unmanned, just orientally brown, unhuman. My teeth are wider than mold that dampens my carcass, litter on a saffron field under indigo sky. What remains is gelatinous scat mixed with cow pats plus Bud Light plus cattlemen. I'm not the pioneer unwoman or the Cebuanic Menipixie dream girl. My closest relative is Kafka's monster. We bleed kaleidoscope, scare cowmen, repel suburbia. Our faces don't read West, East, MF. Man buries us in mud, smiles, says, God bless America. Thank y'all so much. Maraming salamat po. Bye-bye, guys.
We do have one taker from the audience who's going to be coming up very shortly to share a story with you all. That's really brave and exciting that we've got one more teller for the night. And that person is Renee Ankney, and they use they, them pronouns. So we're going to make them feel very welcome in just a moment as they make their way up to the stage. So hearing Danny talk about video games and identifying with a character, I thought about my journey as a little gay boy playing Street Fighter II Turbo in the 90s. And out of all the characters that I could choose from, I chose to be the girl, Chun-Li. And apparently that was a common thing for adolescent, preteen boys to do. So that brought back a flashback right there, just hearing Danny talk about that. So I think we might have a teller coming up to the stage. And then another thing, too, that AP brought to mind was all my friends growing up, my best friends, they were all girls. And I don't know what it is about little gay boys that a lot of times that's who they're drawn to and feel safe with and run around with. And I think I have a lot more exploration of my own gender to just think about than I have before. And that's one of the gifts of just hearing all these stories and poems tonight. And maybe that's something you're walking away with too, that it's something you've really never had to confront or consider. And it might be interesting and powerful to just reflect on that a little bit more than you ever have. All right. With all that being said, feel like I've turned back into teacher mode, so I apologize. But we'll make Renee feel very welcome as they come to the stage.
Greetings. I was really inspired by all the speakers, and I may regret coming and introducing myself to y'all by myself in my apartment later. But right now I want to talk about how I got to the place where I could stand in front of all of y'all and say that I am a queer, non-binary, trans person. I always knew that I wasn't a girl. If I look like a girl to you, I'm hoping in this audience we've gotten beyond that, but I get ma'amed, and I'm okay with that now. But it was really confusing, because when I was a kid, my friends were girls, and I was okay with that, and I thought I liked boys, and I was okay with that, and I thought I liked girls, and I didn't know what that meant, and I started to realize I wasn't doing whatever the thing that every girl was doing was the right way, or what the world thinks is the right way. But it wasn't until I went to college, I think it was around 2002, I was introduced to the idea of queer theory, and it occurred to me, I don't have to be a lesbian, and I don't have to not fit in. There's a thing that I can be queer. And then I graduated from college, and I went to work, and I didn't have a community to help me understand what my queerness meant, and so I went back to being a woman, or what I've called, in my experience, doing business as a woman. I wore the right things in the office. I used she, her. I knew I wasn't the same she, her that everyone else was, and I didn't really have the space in my mental health to explore that anymore. Years and years go by, and I continue to be exposed to our lovely internet extended family. And I get to a place where at the beginning of pandemic, I finally decided, you know, I can't just let people she, her me anymore, and I don't have to look queer enough. I certainly don't have to look masculine enough to be the person who I really am. And so it felt safe. Everything was virtual. I mean, it felt safe as it was gonna feel. And I came out, and I said, I'm using they, them. I'm going by my name, which is not my legal name, and I am not legally changing my name. So many cis people go by names that aren't the name that they sign checks with, and we accept that. And I go by Rain, and folks accept that, and I ask them to continue to do so in a way that I never felt empowered before. And part of the reason I feel empowered is because folks like our speakers before me have gotten up in all kinds of different venues, in spaces like this, on YouTube, on TikTok, on all of our social media, in our classrooms, and it's been so meaningful to me. And so the point of my journey that I'm at today is that I let myself stop wearing bras when we start wearing bras again when we went back to in-person, because I'm not comfortable in a binder, and I'm not comfortable in a sports bra. So if I look a certain way to you because I have a bra on right now, I've learned how to be okay with that, because I'm still trans in myself. I'm still non-binary in myself. And I can look however I look when I'm teaching, when I'm here with y'all tonight. I am always my gender, and so is everyone else, whatever that looks like in your journey on a given day. Some folks have fluid genders and are different genders different days. I'm always this gender. And today, I'm able to stand up here and tell you that I am a queer, non-binary, trans, visiting assistant professor at Oklahoma State University, and I am thrilled and in awe that I was hired on as an out trans person, and I get to be in my professional life as an out trans person. And I am just so grateful to everybody at every stage of their process in discovering their gender who supports me, who supports themselves, and supports our community. Because the reason we're able to be out today in a way that I wouldn't have been able to imagine when I essentially went back into the closet at 22 years old is because of the voices that people are so bravely bringing to you. And I think that there are braver stories than mine here tonight, but I wanted to share as a form of saying thank you to everyone who's come and given themselves to y'all. Thank you so much.